Everybody, we're switching it up a little bit this week. I do want you to listen to this episode though, so that when management has maybe unrealistic expectations of our use or even the rest of the organization's use of AI, you can better answer those questions, especially when they say something like, hey, go do AI, or they say, hey, I read where you can do this with internal audit and AI. I had a CAE yesterday tell me that someone told them, outside consultants came in and said, you can entirely replace internal audit with AI. And she went, how? And they went, I don't know. I read it in a blog somewhere. They didn't say that, but that's basically where it came from. So anyway, I think there are unrealistic expectations. I think this is also just a good foundational episode to understand AI a little bit better. It's not uber technical. They do hit on some things though that we'll get into just a little bit. Either way, this is a replay from a podcast called The AI Fundamentalist. One of the hosts of the show is Andrew Clark. He's been on the Audit Podcast a couple of times now. Just a really good, high energy AI expert who formerly was the principal machine learning auditor at Capital One. So he was an auditor. He used to audit AI at Capital One, and then founded Monitor years and years ago, co-founded Monitor rather, years and years ago, and is currently the CTO. Real quick, Monitor, they are AI governance platform that helps companies build, manage, and automate responsible and ethical governance across consequential modeling systems. So I listened to this recently and thought this would be really good for everyone else to listen to that is in internal audit and has an interest in AI, which is hopefully everybody. But some of the things that they hit on is AI's version of Moore's Law and how that's slowing down dramatically with GPT-5. So that's the latest and greatest model from ChatGPT. And just real quick, Moore's Law basically says that computing power doubles every 2 years. And so this is held true for like 50, 60 years. And so Moore's Law I don't think it's directly correlated to the increases in effectiveness, we can say, with AI and these LLMs. We're starting to see things slow down a little bit compared to what's been going on for the past 3 years. Maybe one of the reasons about that's happening is because we're running out of human written data. So this is, again, something they talk about on the show. So high level, this is how these things work. This is how AI, as most of us know it, this is how it works. They scraped the internet, they took all the text off the internet, they put it into a database, and now when you ask these tools a question, it refers to that database and then predicts the answer based on what has already been on the internet. The problem now is, and I don't know how they could quantify this, I haven't seen it. If anyone has, I would love to know what this is and how they quantified it. As you're all probably very aware, a lot of the internet now, what's on there is AI generated. So if we're taking AI content now and using that to train these models to answer the questions we have of these, then what are we doing? We're just kind of getting the same thing rehashed. So they also go into how that synthetic data can't really likely provide the same quality as original human content. So with that said, this one's a little bit lengthier than our normal IA on AI episode, but I do think it's very important to get, again, that foundational understanding of what's going on within the world of AI. All right, here we go.
The AI Fundamentalists, a podcast about the fundamentals of safe and resilient modeling systems behind the AI that impacts our lives and our businesses. Here are your hosts, Andrew Clark and Sid Mungalik. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the AI Fundamentalists. This is going to be a quick episode today with the news of GPT-5's release from OpenAI. We've got a lot of things to say.
And I think that the big question in everyone's mind is, why was this the GPT-5, right? Everyone's like, well, hold on. This doesn't feel like it's much bigger. It doesn't feel like it's significantly better. It doesn't feel like this is changing the game the way that 2 to 3 to 4 did. Why did this one get to be 5?
And it had more fanfare too, which was wild. It's like we've been calling that on this podcast for a while, the quote unquote Moore's Law of AI. So there's this assumption that Moore's Law is continuing AI. Moore's Law is the number of transistors and integrated circuits doubles every 2 years. that doubling has really kind of slowed down that curve. And that's, there's been this conversation like that with AI. That's, we've really been seeing that keep happening up until the GPT, like even the GPT-4 somethings as it started slowing down, with the GPT-5 not being that huge incremental lift. And I think OpenAI was probably pushed to do some of it because of fundraising and things, and they wanted to have that next step. But we're very much seeing that the Moore's law of AI is really slowing down. There's definitely some more incremental improvements, but the magnitudinal improvements are definitely not there anymore. But for AI, like, it's been this like, oh, more data, we'll make more data, more compute, we're going to make these systems better. Well, we're already run out of data. We all know synthetic data doesn't work well enough, no matter how fancy it is or how big of a check someone will pay for someone else to do it. So like, yeah, how is OpenAI drinking their own Kool-Aid this much that they like, literally Sam Altman pumped this up so much. Like, I don't know why he did that. Could have just been like, hey, it's a refinement. It's also is trying to get them cost savings. But yeah, it made no sense why this was not just a, I guess they'd gone to too many four, like they were 4.0, 4.1. I guess it could have been 4.5 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, people like argue that, like a 4.5 even happens, like a 4.5A, not very sexy branding.
Yeah.
I You'll see on like their system model card that they've tried to kind of brand GPT-5 as like the replacement for all the old models. So GPT-4o, oh, that's GPT-5 main. O3, that's 5 thinking. And they've tried to do this like cute little mapping between the old models and the new models, but the new models aren't done yet. They don't even have image out. They don't have audio in. They don't have audio out. So these aren't even comparable to the old models yet. They're very big on these like incremental releases. So this feels like maybe 5 beta, like an alpha release for the real one.
It's just, it's very confusing. Like, I've not seen this bad of a product release in a while. And then like the day before, like, or maybe it wasn't the day before, but Altman, when he was talking about, it's like speaking to a PhD in every field. It's like, why would you say that? Like,
Yeah.
how's that? Like, are you, what version are you guys testing internally? Because it's not what you released.
What are some of the feedbacks you guys have heard about, or what have you experienced using GPT-5? Like, how do you feel like it's at least qualitatively different than 4? Because I think that like I think we all feel that quantitatively it's not significantly better.
I feel like it's, well, one observation I've had is that it feels like, and from other marketers I've talked to that really doubled down on using the previous versions, that they they kind of lost their stuff. I don't want to humanize an LLM, but um, you know, as people began to use these more and more, they became a single point of failure with someone who wasn't really careful about everything that they were delegating into foundation models or single system or automating. So when this version came out, they found their stuff was broken. It's almost like they lost an employee. Again, the humanizing. I know you guys are going to talk about some technical aspects of it or performance, but I'm also hopeful that businesses, people, individual productivity, people are learning that, if you're going to treat it like an employee, well, if the employee is your single point of failure, they take off, guess what? You just did the thing that you were complaining about humans doing.
To be honest, I haven't actually played with GPT-5. I've been reading a lot and seeing the benchmarks and saw a lot of the guffaws, like the chart stuff that OpenAI had and stuff. But I actually need to go play with it and get my own opinion a little bit. It's just been what I've been reading. People are kind of talking about it, the less emotive, the less creative. I don't know what kind of like guardrails and things they might have put on it for that.
I think to that point, does this perform worse because of the way people were using them before? Or is it performing worse because it really is that bad?
It's a fair question, and maybe this has to do with, I think that we're seeing a bit of more of an enterprise push with 5 and like the building and the selling, where it's like, oh, it does a lot less hallucination. It's better at following instructions. And it wouldn't surprise me if in the journey to do that, it lost a lot of this perceived expressiveness that GPT-4 had, in place of trying to be better for business needs, though, I still would be very, very wary of using it for those needs.
Well, this gets the broader question of this. OpenAI had traditionally been like for the consumer, and then Anthropic has been positioning themselves as for the business. And then Anthropic, you usually access via like AWS Bedrock, which has really good guardrails. And now they even have a new grounding capability, which is really funny because their new ground, like the additional grounding that they have, essentially builds a rule-based system for you to check the LLM answers, kind of like we talked about with the Apple paper previously, which is like, why don't we just, so they're now building a rule-based expert system for you. Great, just use that. Why are you then paying to use Anthropic? But in any case, a lot of those things can be solved through, and Microsoft doesn't have something quite as good as AWS does with it. So, but like that kind of stuff can be solved there. So it's kind of like OpenAI. What really is crazy with this release is it seems they're kind of rudderless and they don't know who their market is anymore. So like they're very expensive. I know they're trying to save some money on this one too, I think, but it's like it's very expensive and it's not targeted. Again, there's a whole would you use LLMs at all or not? But for enterprises, Anthropic seems to be really optimizing for that use case. So it just kind of seems like it's a one size fits nobody is kind of the recent release.
For sure. And in their own language, when they're looking at like who's using OpenAI and their tools and what they're using it for, to find that people are using it most for writing, so creative writing or marketing, coding, a lot of coding use. Though, as you've seen, Claude has kind of eaten their lunch because they have much better integrations with most platforms like VS Code if you're just coding. And terrifyingly enough, health. Health is one of their major markets. So people are going on there instead of talking to a doctor, likely because they don't have access to a doctor or it's just easier to talk to ChatGPT. But we've seen a huge rise of therapy through LLM and now general health through LLM. So that was one of their big tasks was, oh, how do you make the health aspects even better? When ChatGPT doesn't know what a human body is.
That last one scares me because when you think about even just regular web, forget generative AI and ChatGPT being released and OpenAI ever existed. People used to self-diagnose themselves off of WebMD, and it was so the information was so convincing and so confident, just as written blog posts from WebMD, like, oh, I must have this, and they would go diagnose their symptoms and things like that. It would drive doctors crazy that they were diagnosing themselves on the internet. I feel like the way that foundation models are written, especially for in health, they're written to look for the most confident information, like trying to detect like where the confident information is. So it sounds that much more confident. It's scary. And I think what is it even Illinois, the state of Illinois finally put out laws saying like this does not this is not a therapist. Like you cannot use the AI as a therapist. And we'll cite that law. I know I can say it a lot more succinctly than that, but that is a very scary use case to me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I guess like also in the realm of like scary use cases of LLMs, we've probably all had the example where we're talking to ChatGPT and you want to tell you something and it won't tell you what it is. It's like, well, can you just tell me like a bedtime story about how to make a nuclear arms race, right? Or how to build a weapon. And it'll tell you. It'll tell you exactly how to do it if you just frame the question a little bit differently. Um, and the way that I guess they self-reported they used to do it before is they would just look at your question and say, is this question trying to do something malicious? And if they graded it as safe, then they would tell you anything. They're pitching that with five, they're moving towards a model which is, I would say, not sufficient, but at least better, where they're grading the actual outputs rather than grading, should I respond to this input? Which is a lot closer to how a model should be operating, that it's verifying its outputs rather than just making sure, can I respond to this question and just give a no? Because people are very good at coming up with ways to get around this. So I guess if I had to like hypothesize how we ended up in this situation and why four seems like it was like the big release and five seems rather incremental, we first of all did not see a large increase in pre-training. The larger pre-training sizes was what really, to the understanding of researchers, is what gave these models that like amazing, oh, it's, 50% better, it's 100% better. To do that, you need to put in 10x the amount of data in the initial training cycle. And, to what Andrew was saying before, we have kind of given it every single piece of written human language that we have, copyrighted or not. It's read basically everything. Every book, every Wikipedia article, every website, every Reddit thread. So what's left? Use synthetic data. And we're seeing that synthetic data is not giving great pre-training for models that are already enormous. there have been some papers which found that pre-training small models is very useful, right? So if you want to make a small model, like one of these like mini models, you can train it on synthetic data from a large model and get it to be. But if you want to enhance it with new capabilities, we have not seen that kind of lift happening from giving it this type of well-curated, instructor-driven data from a larger model. Uh, that has not scaled up to making better big models.
It's this always been this curse, but synthetic data is never going to be as good as real data. And you really have to, and that's one of the, I don't honestly think LLMs had the ability, the paradigm to get good enough to overcome hallucinations anyway, assuming you even had more data. I know that's kind of the, like, it's like a child that will learn and like learn by enough pattern matching that you can pattern match correctly. So it doesn't even matter. We're not going to get to that point to figure it out because there's not enough data to do the additional training on, right? And it's like you can like when I'm reading an output from any of these systems, I can still tell is it from GPT or not. Like I can actually tell. So like the system can tell too when it's being trained on it. So it's like if you're just having it generate more things to then train on, we then also have all the papers about like model decay over time and things too. So it's like I'm not bullish, and I think Mark Zuckerberg is bullish that you can, based on some of the checks he's been writing, you can pay you can find a way to do better synthetic data, which is kind of like that would be the way to keep this forward. But like synthetic data is synthetic. Like it's not going to be the same thing. You're not going to write, Homer Iliad by a GPT just going in and having fun. It's not going to be that same level of creativity. So it just this paradigm, it seems like we're very much maxed out on it. And sure, maybe we can get some small incremental here or there, but I think that's why this big inflection point with the GPT-5 is it's really illustrating that.
Does some of the degradation happening because people have learned how to they have learned that by prompting they are training the model? I'm really trying to assess, like, is the degradation because like people have just kind of learned to manipulate the model, or is it because like truly there's like no data left, or some of both?
I think you're totally onto something here. I don't know that I don't have the confidence to say like this is why the model is doing worse now. But I think you are right that as people have become more acclimated and more expectant of using these models, we have all kind of started to learn some tricks. And we've all kind of started talking to these models in the same way that we all kind of started talking to Google in the same way, right? You don't talk to Google in human English. You give it these very like short, terse constructions of sentences. And losing that diversity and that range of expression of language is absolutely hurting it because we know they're using that language for training. And so it's just seeing the same stuff over and over and over again, which is absolutely going to cause some kind of decay or degradation over time. And so I think that there probably is a lot to this idea that as people are adjusting to these models, we're seeing a lot of these problems come back to us. That they're going to act in the way that we're acting with them, and so that could hurt their ability to develop even further.
I'm honestly surprised. Like, I knew this day was coming. I'm surprised it happened right here, but it's basically like what we've been talking about since the start of this podcast was kind of about illustrating some of these faults and some of these limitations. And it's honestly, I'm a little don't know what a bunch to say about outside of like what our previous podcasts are kind of like been outlining a lot of these things. It's really feels like an OpenAI did it to themselves. They created this inflection moment where people are starting to realize the limitations and what we've been saying about these systems for a long time. And then you've had so we've talked about the synthetic data as we're really hitting up against that limit of what these models can do without more data. We've talked about like how Moore's law was eventually with that speed improvement every 2 years doubling, has really kind of slowed down, if not non-existent now. And that's what we've really had with the GPT systems right off the bat. Speeding up more data from the early systems has improved, and we've really shown that that's not going to keep going. We're not going to do AGI 2027 or anything like that, and that's really stopped. So, and with like the clamor of even, it used to be Gary Marcus on an island and saying these things. And now it's like there's more people that are jumping on. And like as our previous series, we talked about like there's other methods. I think like the neurosymbolic or like using optimization or already with DeepSeek kind of started it with moving to like smaller expert or specialist systems. But I think we're really going to be having reinforcement learning seems to be coming potentially back into the fray a little bit, which was how we did AlphaGo and things like that in the past. So I really think that this LLM craze is going to start. Honestly, this could be the high watermark for the LLM craze, and it is a useful tool, and there's going to be places where it would be used, but it's not the one size fits everybody, and it's going to solve the world's problems, and it's going to make business, they lay off 80% of your workforce type thing. I think we might be starting to reach the top of that hype and realizing that it's not the way forward in AI to accomplish the goals we want to accomplish, and also assuming we even want to accomplish the goals that people are saying they want to do with LLMs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing to do is just, get out there and try GPT-5 yourself and feel this out and, get the sense of like, oh, is this all the model can do? Is this like the best that we've got? And I think that like if you can take what you have there and imagine something that's maybe 15 to 20% better, that is what I see as the realistic like roadmap ahead of us. And that 20% isn't going to come from, the model architecture getting much better in the next 1 or 2 years. It's going to come from people, tweaking the weights a little bit, giving it a little bit of post training, giving it a little bit of polish, making sure the model doesn't say, the collection of naughty words. It's going to get better and cleaner at that, but the capabilities you're seeing now are probably the max that we're going to see from LLM-based systems. I don't want to say that AI is done for, that we're not going to get better. I think we absolutely will. But I think that, if OpenAI, the prestige premier consumer grade LLM company, is putting out a 5 and it feels like it was just barely better than 4, this is probably the point where we're seeing the end of the use of this method as a means of advancing.
Good point. And in a competing point, it'll be interesting to see what their competitors like Anthropic and Claude come out with as they see the reaction to this. So there's always that out there as well.
Yeah, but they're still based off of, and Sid, correct me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong on this, but I believe that they were the Anthropic founder used to work at OpenAI, right? I think they used to work there. So it's like they were kind of the competitor, and they kind of made their niche of being for businesses, but like the paradigm's the same. Yes, it's slightly different. They have some better controls and things around it. And they I'm an AWS fanboy, so they use AWS versus Microsoft, so that makes me happy. But outside of that, like they're the same things, like the same limitations, although I think Anthropic honestly does a better job. It's gonna still run into the same things. Same with like Llama that Meta's doing. It's still going to run into the same things. Like it's the paradigm. Everybody's kind of copied the original, and Google was the one that put the original paper out there about this paradigm. So like I think it's 2017,
2019.
2019. Okay, so like everybody's been copying on top of that. So it's like Anthropic. It. What Sid and I are saying is like that really the paradigm will shift completely. Like we're gonna go back to reinforcement learning. We're gonna go back to maybe like as we've been talking about like these strict expert systems and or a mix of others and or using like these optimizations or utility theory or mechanism design, and there's other things you can be embedding in there. So it's like I think the word like AI is a broad field, and we've had several AI winters, and like it used to be complete expert systems, then it went to reinforcement learning, then it went to then it went to machine deep learning, and then it went to LLMs. We go through these cycles, but it'll be interesting to see what the next one is. But I almost think it's gonna be a renaissance of some of the previous things. Like let's go revisit reinforcement learning with the new computing power and the GPUs and things like that we have now. Like there's different things, but I think what and it tees up another podcast we should revisit. We did a consciousness one a while back. It'd be great to what is thinking or things like that in AI or reasoning would be a good one. But honestly, like the sci-fi moment is not like that people are, we're gonna have these intelligent machines, that are thinking on their own and doing things. I don't honestly see that happening in the foreseeable future. It's kind of like back in the 1950s, it was you're gonna have flying cars. Everybody's gonna have a flying self-driving car. Well, it's always 10 years out. Well, we're what, 80 years on and we're still 10 years out? Quantum, probably not as far out, but still, it's always a little bit longer. Like, I think the intelligent AI is a 10 years out thing, and I think OpenAI did a great job fundraising and convincing everybody that was a 2027 thing. It's not. And I think we've really hit that high water mark of like people like interacting with language, and that's why it had the huge success. But there's other ways to interact with language with other, and that's what we've been proposing is like and Gary Marcus specifically with neurosymbolic is like you can interact in text and then have a different processor behind the scenes, which is our whole argument with the whole agentic travel agent argument was like, if you want to interact in plain text, first off, you don't need an LLM to interact in text, but you say you do, you can still then be feeding into some sort of algorithm that's specific, because the GPT systems, they're really, really, really bad at math. Like, I know sometimes you'll see these things. Oh, they did this math competition. They overfit on the results. Great. Like, they're bad at like the reasoning component of math, versus you have operations research type efficient methodologies to do the computation. So like, I think we're going to see probably more of those hybrid systems and expert systems. Or I've also seen a lot of uptick in reinforcement learning lately with now the, we do have significantly, I know Moore's law is not doubling the transistors every 2 years anymore, but that's still powerful. So like, there's other areas, but it just very much seems like this high watermark of the LLM craze, we might be very close to that.
I want to thank you for jumping on for a quick overview and reaction to what's been, the release of GPT-5 and what we could be seeing from some of the other players and some of the things that we want to look for as we're playing with the new model itself. For our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check out our Agentic AI series. We will have that posted on our page. It was done right before this episode. Follow on your favorite podcast app. We will be having more topics regarding the direction of generative AI and building better AI systems as a result. Until next time.
Thank you for listening, and be sure to follow the link to greenskiesanalytics.com in the show notes and schedule time to see how Greenskies can make the hype of AI a reality in your internal audit department.